You know, we always say that emotional intelligence is like the key to career success, right? But what happens after you land that dream job or you finally get that promotion? Today, we're going deeper, looking at how to make emotional intelligence like a driving force for your whole career, not just the beginning.
Yeah, it's about seeing emotional intelligence differently, not as like a finish line you cross, but something you're always working on.
Totally. And you know what? The Pathway to Work podcast, their final episode is called Sustaining Emotional Intelligence for Long-Term Career Success. And their take on this is really interesting.
What I found fascinating was how much they emphasize that emotional intelligence is not static, it has to change as your career does.
So it's not about like those quick wins early on. It's
Yeah.
about building something that lasts.
Exactly. It's like physical fitness, right? You don't just go to the gym once and then you're set for life.
That's a great analogy. So sustaining emotional intelligence, it's about that ongoing effort.
Yeah, like building a muscle.
So let's break it down. Pathway to Work had these 4 strategies: self-reflection, being open to feedback, adapting to change, and practicing gratitude. What do you think about those?
Well, self-reflection, I think it's one of those things that gets overlooked a lot, especially when everything's so fast-paced at work. But you got to understand your own emotions, how you work. It's about asking yourself those tough questions. Like, what makes me tick? How do I react when things get crazy? How are my emotions affecting my work and how I interact with people?
That makes sense, but sometimes knowing your triggers isn't enough, right? How do
No.
we actually use that self-awareness to make like positive changes?
That's where the next strategy comes in, being open to feedback. And I know feedback can be hard to take, but it's seriously valuable. It's like someone's holding up a mirror showing you things you wouldn't see on your own.
It's like they say, feedback is the breakfast of champions, but how do we make it less scary, you know?
For me, being specific helps. Instead of just asking generally, how am I doing? I started asking things like, what's one thing I could do better in my presentations? That way, the feedback feels more manageable.
That's a great tip. So how do we actually use feedback to change, especially when the world of work is constantly changing?
Well, that's where adapting comes in. Your emotional intelligence, you can't just stay the same. It has to evolve. You know, what worked in one job or one situation might not work in another.
So it's not just maintaining a certain level, it's about growing and changing with those challenges.
Exactly. And this ties into the story the Pathway to Work podcast told. They had this project manager who was having a tough time with their team. I actually have a similar story I think you'll find interesting.
Oh, now I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So I was talking to this marketing director, right? And she was feeling burned out, frustrated with her team. She always thought she was emotionally intelligent, but nothing seemed to be working anymore.
I think we've all felt that, like your go-to tools suddenly stop working. What did she do?
She took a step back and really focused on self-reflection. And when she looked at the situation, she realized she wasn't setting good boundaries with her team. She was doing too much, and it was building up resentment.
So she was taking on everyone's stress, and it was affecting her.
Exactly. And this is where being open to feedback was so important. She realized she needed to hear from her team to understand how her leadership was impacting them. And through these conversations, she learned so much about how to communicate better and delegate more effectively.
Those honest conversations were key, huh? But changing how you lead, that can be tough. How did she manage that?
That's where adapting to change comes in. She had to realize that leading a bigger, more diverse team was different from what she'd done before. She had to change how she communicated, be more strategic about delegating, and be okay with letting go of some control.
So her emotional intelligence actually had to grow to meet the demands of her role.
Right. She realized to be a good leader, she had to change, even if it meant being uncomfortable and trying new things. You know, one thing she talked about was the importance of gratitude through all of this.
That makes sense. Gratitude can be so helpful, especially when things are tough. But how did she use it?
She would start each day by thinking of 3 things she was grateful for. They could be small things, even a good meeting or a helpful colleague. And doing this helped her shift her focus to the positive, which made the challenges feel less overwhelming.
It's like training your brain to see the good even when things are crazy.
Exactly. And that change in mindset really helped her navigate the tough stuff and ultimately create a more positive and productive environment for her team.
This is such a good example. It really shows that emotional intelligence is like a journey, not a destination. You're never really done learning.
I totally agree. And it's not just about managing your own emotions. It's about understanding how your emotional intelligence affects everyone around you, Your team, your colleagues, even the whole organization.
So how do we go from just managing our own emotions to using emotional intelligence to build a career that's truly fulfilling? That's what we'll explore next. I thought it was interesting how Pathway to Work connected emotional intelligence to having a fulfilling career. It's not just about your skills or experience, it's about finding work that aligns with what's important to you, right?
Yeah, they talk about defining your core values as like the first step. Asking yourself those big questions like, what really motivates me? What kind of impact do I want my work to have? What kind of environment do I need to thrive?
It's about figuring out what success actually means for you, not just following some preset path.
Right, and self-awareness is huge here. It's not just about knowing your strengths, it's also about your emotional needs. Do you like working with people, or do you prefer to be on your own? Do you get energy from fast-paced environments, or do you need more stability and routine?
And once you know those needs, you can set goals that match your values.
Exactly. That alignment is so important for feeling fulfilled in the long run. Like if you're someone who values creativity and making a real impact, working in a super bureaucratic organization is probably going to make you feel stuck, even if it pays well or looks good on your resume.
So how can we use emotional intelligence to handle those inevitable career bumps in the road? We all have those moments where we doubt ourselves or things just don't go our way.
That's where resilience comes in. Emotional intelligence gives us the tools to manage those tough feelings that pop up when things don't go as planned. It's about seeing challenges as opportunities for growth.
That sounds good in theory, but how do we actually do that? How do we go from feeling defeated to seeing a setback as a chance to learn?
I think it starts by actually acknowledging those difficult emotions. Don't try to suppress feelings like disappointment or frustration. Let yourself feel them, but don't dwell on them. And then ask yourself some questions. What can I learn from this? Could I have done something differently? What new skills can I develop so I'm better prepared next time?
So it's like taking that negative energy and using it to grow.
Yeah. And that's how we build resilience. It's not about avoiding challenges. It's about having the emotional intelligence to handle them well and come out stronger on the other side.
That's a great perspective. The Pathway to Work podcast, they had this challenge for their listeners. What's the biggest emotional intelligence lesson you've learned from this series? It's about taking all this information and finding those aha moments.
For me, it's realizing that emotional intelligence is a journey. You're never really done learning and growing. It's something we have to keep working on throughout our careers and our lives.
And that journey is different for everyone. There's no one right way to do it.
Exactly. We all have our own strengths, our own challenges, our own paths. What matters is that we commit to the process of learning, growing, and becoming more emotionally intelligent.
Pathway to Work also had this thing called the Sustaining Emotional Intelligence Challenge. They encourage listeners to pick one specific habit to add to their routine.
It's about taking all this great information and actually doing something with it. We've talked about self-reflection, feedback, adapting to change, and gratitude. Which one really resonates with you right now?
You know, for me, it's that daily gratitude practice. It's so easy to just get caught up in everything and forget to appreciate the good stuff.
I like that one too. Even just 5 minutes of reflection can make a difference.
Okay.
How about you? What habit would you like to work on?
I think I'm going to try to be more intentional about asking for feedback. I know it can be a little uncomfortable, but I know it's important if I want to grow.
That's a great goal. And remember, it doesn't have to be this big formal thing. You can just ask a coworker for their thoughts after a presentation or check in with your manager to get feedback on a project.
That's helpful. It's about those small steps and being consistent.
Exactly. And over time, those small steps lead to big changes in how we approach our work, our relationships, our whole careers.
So we've covered a lot. The benefits for individuals, navigating challenges, aligning your career with your values, even putting these ideas into action. But I'm wondering, can we zoom out even further?
What do you mean?
Well, we've been talking about emotional intelligence on a personal level, but what if we thought about it on a societal level? What could it do to help with some of the bigger problems we face?
That's a really interesting thought. Thinking about emotional intelligence on that bigger scale, we usually talk about how it affects us as individuals, but what happens when we apply it to like systems and structures?
It's almost like we're expanding what emotional intelligence means, right?
Yeah.
Going from just the personal to something more collective.
Exactly. What would it even look like to build emotional intelligence into our communities, organizations, even governments?
Imagine a workplace where leaders really care about empathy and understanding, not just getting things done. Or think about teams where feedback isn't scary. It's seen as a way to help everyone grow. It's like a whole cultural shift, right?
Right.
Moving away from only valuing intelligence in the traditional sense and starting to really appreciate and develop emotional intelligence.
And it's not just about making people feel good. There's a lot of research now that shows emotional intelligence actually leads to real benefits,
Hmm.
like better teamwork, more innovation, people being able to work out conflicts better, even less stress and burnout.
So it's not just good for us personally, it's good for businesses too.
Exactly. And thinking about emotional intelligence in society makes me think about some of the big problems we're facing, like climate change, all the political division, social injustice. These are issues that need more than just smart ideas to solve. They need people to understand each other, to care about each other, to be willing to come together.
That's a powerful point. So are you saying that emotional intelligence could actually help us solve these problems?
I think so.
Yeah.
Imagine if we approach these tough issues with more empathy and understanding. Imagine leaders who are really good at having hard conversations and finding common ground.
It's like emotional intelligence becomes this superpower for making things better. Not just for individuals, but for everyone.
I like that. It's about recognizing that how we handle our own emotions, it can spread outwards,
Yeah.
affecting our relationships, our communities, even the systems we're part of.
It reminds us that we're all connected in some way.
Exactly. And that brings us back to this idea of sustaining emotional intelligence. It's a journey we never really finish. It's something we do together.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's all challenge ourselves to not just work on our own emotional intelligence, but to encourage it in our workplaces, our communities, and the world.
That's a great way to think about it. Let's use emotional intelligence to make positive change, both as individuals and as a society.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it insightful and maybe even a little inspiring. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep those emotionally intelligent conversations going.